Hey, wild listeners, it's Chris. That's probably obvious by now if you're familiar with my voice these days. Anyway, I'm coming on here to tell you about something I'm pretty excited about, our Patreon. We've been working hard to get you extra content like extended interviews and the wild side chats and story time with me. There's a link to Patreon in the show notes. Okay, on to the show. It's one of those viral TikTok animal moments. There's a huge male Argus pheasant in a wildlife park. Looks just like a peacock, displaying his tall, colourful feathers. He's cornered a female pheasant who looks completely disinterested.
She's just not having it.
He's trying really hard to dazzle her with his plumage because he wants to mate with her. So he's pulling out all the stops, some incredibly flashy moves. He's dipping his head down and spreading his huge 4-foot-long feathers, skipping on the spot and trying desperately to get her attention. And the female's response? She's not even looking at him. She's just facing forward while he puts on his best show 2 inches to her side. Great comedy, a flashy male and a bored female. But here's the twist. She is watching him, just not the way we expect. Her eyes are on the sides of her head. She sees his whole performance. We just don't see how she sees. It's a perfect example of us humans thinking we understand what an animal is sensing. In this case, what the female pheasant is seeing. It seems like human nature to believe that what we perceive in the world is the only reality, when actually most of what a creature senses is invisible to us. They perceive their world as differently as we perceive ours. I read about this funny pheasant video in a book by Pulitzer Prize winner Yong that's titled An Immense World, How Animal Senses Reveal the Hidden Realms Around Us. And yes, it is an eye-opener. And I'm happy to say Ed is my guest today. We'll talk about the astonishing ways animals sense the world around us, from birds that navigate the open ocean by smell to penguins that sense vibrations underground. By learning how animals perceive their world, it might just change the way we perceive them and make us look at our own world a little differently. From KUOW in Seattle and Chris Morgan Wildlife, welcome to the wild. Ed, thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I started my conversation with Ed Yong by asking him about an animal we know a little bit too much about, the fly. Why are flies the way they are? Why do they zigzag around so sporadically?
Yeah, so flies can sense temperature with their antennae, and they will use that to guide their movements. So, earlier, I was sitting on my sofa and watching this fly buzzing around my living room and executing these really, really sharp angled turns.
Yeah.
And, I think it's very easy to look at that and just think of it as mindless chaos. But that room actually is full of all these temperature microenvironments that I don't detect. To me, there's a thermostat on the wall and it says 70 degrees, and to me, the room is 70 degrees. But different parts of that room will vary quite substantially depending on whether they're in a flow of air or whether they're, lit by the sun or not. And if you're at the scale of a fly, there can be really substantial differences between 1 inch and another, and those differences really matter. So you might heat up to a fatal degree if you spend too long in a part that's too hot.
I love how we can misinterpret some animals' behavior because we don't know which senses they're using or what they're capable of. And your book blew me away for so many reasons as someone into nature to begin with. But it kind of took me to a whole new level. You've explored this world of animal senses so much through this work, and knowing what you now know about animal senses through writing this book, which animal would you most like to be?
Oh God, that's so difficult. That's like asking what your favorite food is, or But my serious answer to this is the animal that am actually looking at right now. So I'm sitting in my office and I can see my dog. His name is Typo. He's a corgi. I can see him prowling around the garden, getting up to mischief. And I would love to walk the world in his shoes for a few days.
What is it? Help us imagine what that world would be like. What's Typo the corgi's world like? Take us through that.
So for a start, it's much lower than ours. It's closer to the ground. But it is dominated by smell. So, I'm looking at him right now. He is exploring our garden and he is sniffing everything. He is sniffing a random blade of grass. He's sniffing the aloe that we've got growing. He's sniffing a bit of dry dirt and now he's rolling in it. That's terrible. But just by watching him behave, you can see how important his nose is to him. He uses his nose the same way I use my eyes. He sniffs around in the same way that I look around. And through that, he's getting a huge range of odors that I don't perceive from things that look completely nondescript to me, but are clearly bursting with interest and information to him. And that is the theme of my book, of An Immense World, that each animal, each individual is locked in their own little sensory bubble, that they're only perceiving a thin sliver of that immense world.
I'm sensing that you're talking about an Umwelt. Can you define that? What is an Umwelt?
So the word Umwelt it's just German for environment, but in the context of an animal's senses, it has this very special and specific meaning. So the Umwelt is not just a physical environment, right? So my dog's Umwelt is not the grass that he's walking through or the plants around him. It's the specific cocktail of sights and scents and textures and sounds that he can access. It's the part of the world that he can sense. And the core idea is that it is always going to be a small sliver of the fullness of the world. He can only sense a part of it. And the part that he can sense is going to be different than the part that I can sense, or the part that the birds or the butterflies that I can see in my garden can sense. And just to loop back to your original question, the reason why I pick Typo as opposed to any of the other animals in the book with incredible senses that I can't even begin to imagine, is that at its core, An Immense World is a book about curiosity and about empathy. It's about wanting to understand the lives of other creatures around us and caring enough about those lives to decide to step into their shoes. And, while it might be amazing to spend a day with the senses of a blue whale or a hummingbird or any of the other things that we might talk about in this interview, I think actually understanding what it might be like to be Typo would give me a better understanding of him and his needs and his life. And, it would make me a better friend and parent.
And Typo deserves that.
I think so. Absolutely. Right. And An Immense World is a book about diversity, not about superiority. The argument is that the Umwelt of another animal is worth thinking about, not just because it's better or wider or whatever, but just because it's different. And that variety is part of what makes the natural world so incredible and so enticing to me.
It's so well said. Let's dive into the senses a bit more on this, because you bring up smell.
Yeah.
It took us a while for us to figure out that birds can smell.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell me that story?
Yes, I can. So there has been this long persistent myth that birds cannot smell, that they have no sense of smell. And that myth was actually promulgated by John James Audubon. Audubon conducted a series of frankly ludicrous studies in which he ended up claiming that turkey vultures, and by extension every other bird, had no sense of smell, which is ludicrous for several reasons. First, that turkey vultures actually have among the best sense of smell in the bird world, and maybe in general. They have an incredible ability to smell the carcasses that they are searching for from long distances away. But it's also ludicrous because birds in general smell actually very well. Many of them have very acute senses of smell. And the birds that I really focus on in the book are seabirds like albatrosses, petrels. They're called the tube noses. And, they're called that for a reason. They have special structures on their beaks that are, really good at drawing in currents of air and extracting smells from that air. So an albatross is flying over an ocean that just seems featureless to us. If you have a good nose like an albatross does, then what you would know is that the ocean is this rolling topography of hills and valleys of smell that reflect a lot about the underlying water, about how much food, how many nutrients there are. And I think that's really at the core of the book and what I want readers to do, to start thinking about what it is like to experience the ocean from the point of view of an albatross, how different it might seem, and to get a sense of how much we are missing.
Yes, I got to admit, I was disappointed that there wasn't an entire chapter, Ed, devoted to grizzly bear's sense of smell.
I know,
but that could be your next book. I'll leave that with that thought with you. But let's switch from smell into color a little bit. Certain relationships between plants and animals that have developed in surprising ways based on their sense of color. Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah. So, I'm looking out in my garden right now, and there are many, many colors in the flowers that I can see that are very beautiful to my eyes. But my eyes cannot detect ultraviolet, which is color just off the violet end of the rainbow. And most animals that can see color actually can see ultraviolet. And that includes bees, butterflies, and birds, all the kinds of things that would pollinate flowers. If you can see ultraviolet, then what you will notice on many, many flowers are patterns that humans don't perceive. So halos around the middle of the flower, landing strips, bullseyes, patterns that draw the attention of pollinating animals. There's so much that we are missing. The same is true for many of the other animals that can see the ultraviolet on flowers. So birds, for example, if you can see ultraviolet, you can detect patterns on the plumage of birds that you would otherwise miss. In America, one of the most common backyard birds is the American robin. Its chest is famously very red, and males and females are both red, and they're very difficult to tell apart. But if you were another robin, they would be very easy to tell apart because the male robin's breast also blazes in ultraviolet in a way that the female robins doesn't.
Wow.
Right. Like in many common birds, the males and females look identical to our eyes, but actually look very, very different to the eyes of the birds themselves.
This invisible, visible world, if I could say that, it doesn't really make sense, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
And talking about birds, a perfect segue to what we can hear. We were out with another birding expert recently. We're doing a podcast on bird watching and the layers of it and the senses that you might use when you go bird watching. And it's an episode coming out later this season. So we were out, and of course you're hearing tons of bird song, but apparently there are things going on that the birds are saying that we're not hearing. I know you talked about that a little bit in your book. Do you remember about the zebra finch?
I do. So the hearing ranges of birds are usually more or less the same as those of us, of humans. So we are hearing most of the range of notes that they are singing. And yet, I think every bird knows that there are many species where you get this sense that there's something going on that you can't perceive. The notes are going by so quickly, they're changing so quickly that we're not missing things in terms of pitch, but we are missing things in terms of speed. Well, our sense of hearing works more slowly than that of most birds. So we aren't able to detect the same kind of fast-paced changes in pitch and in volume And it turns out that those very quick changes, what's called the temporal fine structure, is where a lot of birds are encoding meaning into their songs. One of the best sets of studies about this was done by a guy called Robert Dooling with a bird called the zebrafinch. Zebrafinches are native to Australia. They're very beautiful birds, often kept as pets around the world. And they have very, very beautiful and very complex songs. Dooling did these experiments where he took tiny snippets of those songs and essentially flipped them. It's as if you took a movie and took like 3 frames in the middle and just reversed their order. When you flip these sounds, human listeners couldn't tell the difference.
Oh,
and
interesting.
The
Wow.
birds, and the birds absolutely could. So they are really, really cueing in to changes in their songs that occur at a speed that we can't perceive. And I think that's extraordinary to me.
We'll be right back after a short break. I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Ed Yong. It's really fascinating stuff, isn't it? We've got lots more episodes of The Wild coming out this season, so don't go away. But if you want even more, check out our Patreon. For just a few bucks a month, you can find behind-the-scenes videos, there's extended interviews, there's unedited content, and story time with me. The link to our Patreon is in the show notes. All right, back to the show, and thanks for listening. This whole world that you describe seems to sort of sit a little bit between science and imagination and reality and mystery. And
That's right.
I love this whole sense of a sixth sense. And you make me think differently about it. I have a friend who has horses. She says those horses go crazy every time it's a full moon. You hear about birds moving from an area where a hurricane's just about to hit. I had a crazy experience. Maybe 15 years ago, I was guiding a trip down to Antarctica, and we were standing on the beach, and our Zodiac's boats were right on the shore there. And way off, about 150 yards away, a giant iceberg cracked off and created a wave that we looked at and binoculars, a couple hundred yards away, thinking, oh, look at that, that's amazing. What an amazing ice carve coming off there into the water. Well, we were surrounded by penguins on the shore, Gentoo penguins, like just up to our knees. And they sort of all looked at each other and looked up at us. And they all turned away from the water and ran up the beach to gain higher ground. I'm like, what is going on? And sure enough, that wave was almost big enough to turn over our big Zodiac boats. And I looked at around, and we all ran up the beach in the footsteps of the penguins at this point, going, they knew much sooner than we did that little mini tsunami was coming from the ice that had carved off a few hundred yards away, like this almost sixth sense, Can animals do that? Is there this sixth sense going on?
So I actually hate that term, and like I get why people use it. I think often when we say a sixth sense, there's almost this implication that animals are doing something paranormal. They are, seeing into the future. They're detecting this like special knowledge that we're unaware of, and that's kind of true, but it's just the Umwelt idea, right? That there are stimuli in the world, there are cues in the world that we are oblivious to and that other animals can detect. So with things like earthquakes, with things like that iceberg carving off into the water, a lot of that is probably things like infrasound. So, these large geological forces create very deep sounds that are too low for us to hear, on vibrations that we don't really feel because we're not really used to tuning into those because we often wear hard-soled shoes. But if you're an animal that can perceive infrasound or can feel those vibrations, then you first perceive them and you're probably used to understanding what they mean.
Right.
But what is that? That's detecting infrasound is just hearing. Detecting vibrations is just touch.
So my penguins may have heard a vibration or something that they have evolved to cope with and I suppose recognize is what you're saying, right? Right.
Absolutely. I mean, what are penguins doing all the time? They're literally standing on the ice.
Yeah.
They're right there. The calving iceberg releases vibrations that travel across that stretch of water very, very quickly, shake the ice under your feet. You probably have no idea because you're wearing really, really thick shoes, and because never in your life have you needed to sense vibrations under your feet. Penguins do that all the time, and they know what it means, so they're off into the distance, and that's just touch, right? That's just one of the regular 5 senses.
Yeah.
And I think that what I think we should take from these examples and the Umwelt idea is that there is so much of animal behavior that could very easily be interpreted as supernatural, but is just simply natural. It's just natural in a different way than what we perceive and what we are used to extracting meaning from.
Very nice. Yes, I'll stop using sixth sense. You've put me in my place about I totally understand how that would become irritating, right? It's like, no, it's not a sixth sense. It's a sense that we just don't have almost, right?
Well, but the other thing is, there are senses that even we have that go beyond the usual 5 that never get counted. So there's this proprioception, which is what, if you close your eyes right now, you know where your body is, right? You know where your arms are, and whether you're sitting or standing. That's proprioception. It's your sense of the connections in your body. There's equilibrioception, which is your sense of balance. So there's this idea of 5 senses is a very Aristotelian way of thinking about the world, and it doesn't actually quite match up to the biological reality. And then the 6th sense is an idea that sort of gloms on top of that, and that also doesn't quite work.
Well, what is it then, do you think, that gets in the way of humans really understanding animal senses?
I think it's that it is genuinely impossible to fully appreciate the subjective experience of another animal or even another individual. I don't know how you experience the world. I don't know Chris's Umwelt, just as you don't fully know mine. It's hard enough to do that when we share the same language and when we are the same species, let alone to imagine all the colors that a hummingbird can see, or all the smells that my dog can sense, or what an albatross detects, or what a grizzly bear is experiencing in its world. You can try and find out. Science can give us an understanding of that. Technology can help. Good writing can help. But to really, really step into the shoes of another creature and experience the world as it does is fundamentally impossible. And I think there's something kind of beautiful about that, to know that you'll never quite do it, but you're going to try anyway because it's worth it. Yes.
Do you think human technology might ever let us truly step into the sensory world of another creature?
So I actually don't think it can. And I write about this in the book. I think, it can, of course, to a certain extent, right? Like in slightly cheap ways. So I can buy a pair of night vision goggles and see stuff at night in detail that I would miss otherwise, that, other nocturnal animals can see. So in those ways, sure, I can start dipping my toe into another Umwelt. But the idea that we're going to fully appreciate the Umwelt of another creature through technology, I just think is a fantasy. There are lots of folks who think that AI is going to do this. I don't think it will work. Like, a lot of the ideas about using AI to understand, like, for example, a whale or a bird, like, it sort of treats us as if it was just a simple vocabulary problem. Like, there's a sort of dictionary that can tell you there's like a zebra finch to human dictionary or a blue whale to human dictionary. And there isn't, right? The reason the Umwelt of a whale and a human is different is not just that we're using different media to communicate, but because our bodies are totally different. The senses are different. The nervous system is different. The ecology is different. All of that is different. You can't duplicate that through tech. And that's why I keep on emphasizing the importance of imagination. There's no technological cheat that is going to bypass that effort. You're always going to need to make it. And I think that ultimately making it is more rewarding and gets you closer to what the Umwelt concept is really all about.
What a fantastic answer. Thank you, Ed. I love that. A few years ago, we interviewed a gentleman named Asa Raskin on the front end of AI development to understand how animals communicate and hopefully communicate back to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him flat out, it terrifies me. Like we've not disturbed the world of wildlife enough. Now we think we can talk to them. But you just encapsulated it so beautifully there. It's not just about vocabulary and like this sound means this word. It's not a direct translation in any way, is it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of room for error there and a lot of room to mess up if we're not careful, I think.
I agree. Yeah.
I guess we'll see. But how should we sit with that reality, do you think, that we never maybe able to fully appreciate the umwelt of other animals?
I think it's fine. I think that I think we should learn to be okay with not having all the answers, but knowing that trying to get them is the point. Trying to make the effort to understand the umwelt of another animal.
Mm-hmm.
There's joy and purpose in it. It's not just about the destination. The process is what matters.
Well, talking of which, is Typo still sniffing around out there outside your window?
I don't know where Typo's gone. I should probably try and track down his mischievous little...
This has been wonderful. Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a fascinating topic. I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good to talk to you, Chris. Take care.
Ed Yong is the author of An Immense World: How Animals' Senses Reveal the Hidden Realms Around Us. If you'd like to listen to the episode I talked about a bit earlier in the show from Season 5 of The Wild about AI and animal communication, it's linked in the show notes. I talked with Asa Raskin, owner of the Earth Species Project, and UBC professor Karen Barker about how close we are to being able to communicate with animals and what ethical considerations come with that. Check it out. It's called Digital Dr. Dolittle, Decoding Animal Conversations with Artificial Intelligence. And if you're a teacher, check out our curriculum. Bring the wild to your classroom. You can find it at chrismorganwildlife.org. The Wild is a production of KUOW in Seattle and Chris Morgan Wildlife, with support from Wildlife Media. Lucy Suchek produced this episode. Fact-checking by April Craig. Our theme music is by Michael Parker. Additional music from MusicBed and Blue Dot Sessions. The Wild is hosted, produced and written by me, Chris Morgan. A very special thank you for their kind financial support to Jill and Scott Walker, Rose Letwin, Ellen Ferguson, the Isdell family, Anna Kimball, Barbara Stallman, John Taylor, Paul Lister, Bob Yellowlees, and John and Julie Hanson. Thanks for listening with those big, beautiful human ears. Till next time, take good care.